There are a lot of myths running around out there about 7th gen Toyota Celicas. Reasons they do certain things, ways to fix them. Hopefully today we can shed some light on two of the problems that Celicas seem to have. One is they take forever to warm up when the weather's cold, and the other one is when the heat's on, they blow cold air out of the driver's side air vent or passenger side air vent for European cars. Let's see what we can find out. First, what we're going to need is some cold weather. Okay, just kidding. This is the actual temperature that it is in the shop. And that safety poster there on the left, that's from SV Seeker. If you like to see people build big stuff, check him out. The age-old question. Well, at least since about 10 or 12 years after these cars were built, why does my car blow cold air out of the heat vent on the driver's side of the car? Or for those of you whose cars are built backwards and has the steering wheel on this side, why does my Celica blow cold air out of the passenger side vents with the heater on? Well, here's probably the main reason why. This is a heater, air conditioning core matrix, blend doors and all that out of a 2000 to 2005 Toyota Celica. One of the reasons I've seen stated for having cold air coming out of the passenger side heater vent is the blend door not actuating properly. And I'll continue to refer to it as the driver's side because I'm over here in the US and that's what it is. Well, when the blend door opens and closes, it controls airflow. So if you're not getting any airflow out of the passenger side, then it would be the blend door. But the blend door is all connected together and it opens all the way across. This is the heater AC matrix sitting in the same position as it would be if it were in that car right there. In other words, camera position is from the passenger seat. What I'm going to do is remove the heater core out of this. This cover was on there. Yeah, which way was this cover? This cover was on there like this. And then the heater core pulls straight out. Once you take a couple brackets loose from the tubing, the heater core pulls straight out like this. What you have is some very small cores in the heater core, very small tubes for the water to flow through. Exactly like a radiator, but very, very small. What Toyota did and what most people did is they put the inlet and the outlet both on the same end of the heater core. What happens is there's more pressure to flow through this on this end than what there would be over this end. In other words, if there's anything going to get stuck in one of these small tubes, it has more of a chance of getting caught or closing off these tubes than it does these tubes. So as the heater core gets older and the little tiny particles that close these tubes up start to plug up the tubes, it will plug these up on this end first. Air still flows through the core itself, but the little tiny tubes do not carry fluid through them anymore. And as these plug up, this airflow is the airflow that's going to go, yeah, where's it going to go? Oh, it's going to go through the heater box. This is the center two vents. This is the vent headed for the driver's side. This is the vent headed for the passenger side. So if those cores are plugged up on this end, you'll still get full airflow, but all the cool air will be on this end, and all the warm air will be coming out through the cores that still have flow through them. Of course, this is just a theory that I have right now, that it's blocked up on this end, but it's the best that I can come up with. You're still getting airflow, you're not getting hot water. I have not tried to clean one of these out yet, but I plan to do that in the future. If the problem is indeed a problem with airflow, you have a cabin air filter that's behind this glove box. All you got to do is rotate that pin. It pulls out, glove box drops, everything in the glove box falls out on the floor, and you can't see what I'm doing from there. That is a cabin air filter right there. All you have to do is, very hard to do looking at it through the camera, pull it back, both ends, slide it straight out, it'll drop right out of there. That one was not replaced too long ago, and you can see it's already got a good amount of trash in it. I hate doing stuff like this with the camera held in my hand, give you all motion sickness, but anyway, and it slides right back up into that slot. What I was grabbing and pulling on was these little ears right here. Anyway, slides right back up in the slot. Click, click. This is looking into the air intake side of the heater AC matrix box. Replace your cabin air filter. I think whoever owned this car must have just threw his away. So it's 30 degrees outside and you're wondering why your Celica takes forever to warm up. It's probably not the thermostat, it's probably not air trapped in the system, it's probably just because by design these cars take a long time to warm up, longer than some others when the weather's real cold. And there's a few reasons for that. The design of this engine, this is the coolant reservoir. This hose right here, as soon as the motor starts running, starts pulling water out of the bottom of the coolant reservoir into the motor. This motor right here basically is what keeps air from locking up in the head. Water immediately starts flowing into the coolant reservoir. So the first thing you got to do is warm the engine, warm the water up that's in the block, warm the water up that's in the catch can. That's not too bad because there's not really air flowing through an aluminum radiator to keep this water cool. Problem comes in with this one. This line brings water off the top of the radiator to keep the radiator from airlocking, and it flows a constant flow of water out of the top of the radiator. This line coming off the top of the radiator right here, flowing into this tank, means that everything that's in the end tank on the radiator has to be warmed up too. Now, water's not just going to stop circulating a little bit in and out of these cooling fins on this end of the radiator just because the thermostat's not open. There's a tiny bit of water flow even with the thermostat closed because of the little vent in the thermostat. So now the engine has to heat up the engine, the water in the engine, water in the catch can, all the water in this end tank, all the while if you're moving down the road, it is actually pulling air through and cooling this water off just a little bit. So it can take 10 or 15 minutes for this car to warm up, especially if you're running down the road at 40, 45, 50 miles an hour. So what I'm going to do is start this car up, let it warm up, see how long it takes for the coolant tank to get warm, and see how long it takes for this line to warm up. I mean, once this line is warm, then the coolant tank will be warm, and see where the temperature gauge is at as this stuff warms up. car is cold. The temperature here inside the shop is about 68 degrees. Hard for anybody to see, but there is coolant flow in that tank. Like I said, as soon as you start it, I'm not even going to open that. This hose right here is already warm. Just barely warm to the touch, but it's not cold like the rest of the rubber hoses are. This one's still cold, so it's still warming up the coolant in the tank. The tank still feels cold. Said this hose is already warm. Temperature gauge has not moved. So it's about 3 minutes of actual running time. This one's hot. Warm. Just barely warm coming out of the top of the radiator. So it's still trying to warm this radiator and tank up. So this water is still cooling the engine off. Temperature gauge is up the first click. 5 minutes. We're still only on the first bar of the temperature gauge. This hose is fairly warm. This hose is fairly warm. This hose is still just barely warm. Upper radiator hose is warm. So we got water flowing through this end tank, flowing through this, flowing back into the motor. That's helping keep the motor cool. We've just gone up to the second bar on the temperature gauge at 9 minutes. Reminder, the temperature in here is 68 degrees. This hose is fairly warm, feels almost like operating temperature. This hose is also warm. Of course, this one's warm, tank's warm. Lower radiator hose still ice cold, so we know the thermostat's not open. Upper radiator hose is actually hot. Feels like operating temperature water. I was able to get my hand underneath and touch the end tank. The end tank on the radiator is actually warm. And this is at almost 10 minutes. It's only at the second bar, idling inside of a shop, not moving, with the temperature about 68 degrees. All right, it just reached operating temperature on the temperature gauge in the car. Lower radiator hose, still cold. This hose is operating temperature, and this hose feels like operating temperature. Matter of fact, that clamp is hot to hold your finger on. So it took it 13 minutes to get to operating temperature, sitting still in a 68 degree garage. That is because it's warming up all the water in the end tank of the radiator, all the water in this tank, and like I said, that's sitting still at 68 degrees. Well, I guess I did all that so I could learn something that I already knew, you know. Well, it was a theory I had. I was pretty sure it was correct. So if it took 13 minutes for it to warm up at 68 degrees inside of a garage, imagine how long it takes sitting outside when it's 35, 40 degrees or even colder. And once you're running down the highway, of course the engine's going to develop more heat, but then you've got air flowing through and around all these components that are trying to warm up. And even after it's been shut off for a few minutes, this lower radiator hose is still ice cold. Still as cold as it was when I first started the car. So the thermostat hasn't even opened yet. So now we know for sure why they take forever to warm up. And I've actually changed the thermostat on one of these cars because it wasn't warming up fast enough. And after I changed the thermostat, it still had the same thing going on. And that's when I figured out that it was because of all that water that moves around. They're still good cars in cold weather. You just got to give them some time to warm up every time you start them, which means they're not really that great when the weather's cold. Not if you're in a hurry anyway. All right, well, that's why that happens. Thanks for watching.